His Grace Gauri Prabhu needs no introduction. Our former temple president, and indeed our managing director, and will remain our managing director for many, many lifetimes to come. If we could kindly request him to please come forward and pay his tribute.
Krishnaya Vasudevaya Hariye Paramatmane Pranata Klesha Nashaya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. On Tuesday morning, I received a phone call about 9 a.m. from Philip. Philip's here, I think. Philip, Mary, KK, and Dhruvi, Shruti Prabhu's carers. Philip called me at 9 a.m. and he said, I think you should come to the annex. And so I left immediately to go. I said to my wife, I'm just going to take a shower and go to see Shruti Prabhu. She's very stubborn on all the maryad of cleanliness, and she said to me, don't bother taking a shower, go straight. So when I got to the Gokul Dham, then I spent the day there with Shruti Prabhu. And later in that day, I was joined there by Sri Radhika, Nitai, and then some of our doctors, Nishikant and Karinaras and Divyesh, all came together. We sat together, we had a beautiful conversation, and then we made the decision that we should have a little kirtan and asked the carers, Altika devotee carers, to come to see Shruti Prabhu. So as we began to gather there, gradually, then Nishikant Prabhu suggested to me, perhaps you could request that the Ram Shila comes from the altar. And I thought, okay, that's quite a thought. Let me give Gadadhar Prabhu a call. So I phoned Gadadhar Prabhu, he was at home, and I said, Gadadhar Prabhu, we were just thinking it'd be nice maybe if the Ram Shila from the altar in the temple could come over to bless Shruti Prabhu. And Gadadhar Prabhu said, I'll just come right now and I'll bring all the deities. And so, somehow or other, a large group of devotees were all gathered. We were singing kirtan. Gadadhar Prabhu and all the pujaris came in straight off the altar. It was like between Gora Arti and the 9 p.m. Arti. And they all appeared most transcendentally and came in. And then Gadadhar Prabhu, he took Ramshila, he put on Shruti Prabhu's head, and then he put Giriraj, and then we had Gauri from the altar. He's bringing Gauri, huge, heavyweight deities, putting on Shruti Prabhu's head. The deities, and Sri Radhika sitting there, just watching everything. And then he placed Ram Shila here, he placed Govardhan Shila here, and the kirtan was going on, everyone was chanting, everyone was crying, and then the deities had to go back to the altar. He said, can I just keep Govardhan here? So sure, keep Govardhan here. He kept Govardhan, we continued to chant and everything. And at that point, with all the devotees, they had gathered, and then just as we all, and Mary and KK, everyone who was very close to that time were with Shruti Prabhu, and then just in that moment, he just breathed his last. But today I want to speak about him, not as a great spiritual leader or an ambassador of ISKCON. I want to speak about him as my friend. Just my friend and my older brother. I want to just share some personal moments that came to my mind this morning, and also a poem. And I would sit with him in various locations, and in the hospital one day, we were in Watford. Oh no, we were in the care home. And he was lying there, and he said to me, Gauri, he said, you're such a good poet. I want you to write a poem for my funeral. He would say these things. One day he said, Gauri, I want you to be there when I die. And I'd say to him, Shri Prabhu, I might walk outside and be run over by a bus. You know, let's not make calculations like this. Anyway, so I have the poem, and I'll come to that. I'd like to say how important it is to have a devotee friend. When my daughter was very small, it was time for her Annaprashna. And I waited 4 hours for a big spiritual guru sannyasi leader to give my daughter her first grains. And in 4 hours, I waited. I felt humiliated. And I left. And I went straight to my older brother and I said, I don't care anymore. You're a guru. You're a spiritual leader. You give my daughter her first grains. Immediately he came to the temple. Sri Radhika was there as well. You may not remember, but you were there. I have you in the photograph. And he gave my daughter her first grains. Not long after that, that's when I lived in India. I'd come back, I'd stay in Shruti Prabhu's house, a little room, small house at the time. The three of us would sleep in the small bedroom together on the floor. Then, shortly after that, I had walked into an office. I think it was Shruti Prabhu's birthday. So a lot of young devotees were sitting there. They had a little birthday cake, whatever. And they said to me spontaneously, would I say a few words? And I just spontaneously said, I think it's better to have a Krishna-conscious friend than a guru. They were probably, Sutapa was there. I don't even remember Sutapa. I think he'd recently joined. It was probably a terrible thing to hear a spiritual leader say. I said, it's better to have a devotee friend than a guru. Because your friend's always thinking for you. And he'll tell you straight. He'll tell you what's in your best interest. Not that a guru won't, but forgive me, my friend. My wife's graduation. We were always running around central London, late for everything. So my wife was graduating as a barrister in the Knights Templar place in London, and we'd been at another function. We knew we had to be there. So we were most neglectful of all of these things, forgive us forever. And we were running through central London like a couple of maniacs in the winter, running through Wembley Station, up and down the elevators. We got lost, we were trying to find the venue, and then we finally got to the venue, and we thought we were locked out. And I was saying, Shruti, Mari's going to kill us. But somehow someone let us in, and then they escorted us up a back staircase to a beautiful gallery like this, and only the two of us were sitting there like the royal family, looking down on my wife taking her graduation. Before I would go anywhere, sometimes I'd go away, I'd go to meetings, I'd go to India. Shruti Prabhu would always come to my office, come in and sit down, and he'd take out an envelope, and he'd say, spending money for you. I took his being my older brother very seriously. I never had an older brother. I mean, who am I supposed to turn to? I took it very seriously. And so, when I was traveling with him, I wouldn't do anything. I'd just say, you make all the arrangements, manage everything, I'll meet you at the airport. What time? And I'd just take my passport. I didn't even take any money. So your older brother usually managed these things. And he managed everything. And he would just turn up and we'd go traveling together. But one time we were traveling and we were in Brussels. And we were coming back. we were in the train station, all gathered. We'd been dropped off by a minibus, and then he said, I just want to go buy my son something. He was always thinking of his son when he was away, Nitai. Once I was in a meeting in Belgium with him, sitting next to him, and he had his little laptop, and he was looking at the football scores. And it was in a devotee meeting, he was looking at the football scores. And I said, when did you become interested in football? He said, no, Nitai's he says, I need to know these things for my son. But what happened in the Brussels airport, he said, I just need to go get something from Nitai. And then he came back out and he said, I left my wallet and my passport in the minibus that's just gone back to Radadesh. In that moment, I felt like 4 years old. I just kind of stood there, and he said, I can't go, I'm just going to have to stay here. And he was just alone. And he's a man, he's an adult, he managed everything for me. But I just couldn't bear to see him standing alone in Brussels. It's not the prettiest of train stations, and he went off anyway, and he stayed at a hotel that night, but we did keep in contact with each other, and I survived the journey back to England and home. During these last over a year, I've been so fortunate to be involved in his personal care and service. We'd be sitting in Gokul Dham, or maybe sitting in Watford Hospital, sitting in the care home, or sitting under that beautiful little tree in the garden with the cherry blossom tree, reading Chaitanya Charitamrita. Whoever would come to visit at that time, we would inflict it upon them. They had to sit and listen to us discussing Chaitanya Charitamrita. Whenever I'd walk in to see him, he would always say, Gauri Das, somehow we have held it together. You all know how humble he was. He would say thank you more times in a day, yes, than I probably said in my entire life. One day we were walking back from the temple, and he was thank you, Prabhu, thank you. It was overwhelming. And then he turned to me and he said, you know why I insist on saying thank you? He said, because I don't want anyone to think I'm special. We developed a little game around this thank you stuff. Casey and Dilip, when they were with me, as soon as Shruti Prabhu said thank you, he'd say, thank you, Gauri Prabhu. And I would turn and I'd say, thank you, Casey Prabhu. And he would turn and say, thank you, Dilip Prabhu. And Dilip would turn and say, thank you, Shruti Prabhu. I started a Facebook page for him. I said to him, I should just put a Facebook page there for you. So important information, we can share it with people. He said, okay, it's fine. So I was very proud of what I did. Came back to him, sit with him, and put it in front of him, and I said, look, sat there with him. I said, look, I put this picture from here, it's from Brussels, Parliament, put this picture at the back, etc., etc., and he sat silently. Then he turned to me and he said, I don't want it. And I said, Shruti, you don't want it? He said, I don't want people to think that I'm special. And I said, I just want to share some announcements about what's going on over here, because when people don't know, they make up a ton of stuff. And then he said, okay, all right, that's fine then, you can do that. So I didn't keep him too informed about what I was posting, just in case he shut me down. I want to say something about his humour. Shruti Prabhu behind the scenes, I mean, you've probably all heard his humour, Bhaktivedanta players and all the rest of it. I played Lord Chaitanya in the drama so many times, and Shruti played Haridas. So I'd be picking up Haridas as Haridas was passing away and carrying him. So sometimes I'd come up to him to take him, and I'd look at him and I'd go, he'd go, Lord Chaitanya, and I'd go, stop it. You know. And then I was standing this was in Watford General, and he was on the bed and I was standing at the window, and he said to me, Gauri Das, he said, you're very handsome. And I said, do you think so? He said, you're a very handsome man. And then I said to him, do you think I should take a second wife? He said, you should definitely take a second wife. I said to him, so why should I take a second wife? And he said, because why should I be the only one suffering? I'd sit beside him in the hospital sometimes. He'd fall asleep on the bed, and then I'd gradually fall asleep on the chair. And he had this wandering arm. Somehow it would find its way out from the bed, and then I'd be sitting like this, and I'd feel a little tap on the top of my head, just like that. And I'd wake up and I'd go like, oh, is everything okay, Shruti? He'd be like. And then he would fall asleep again, and then I would fall asleep again. And then, Shruti Prabhu, you know. And after the fourth time I said, Shruti Prabhu, why do you keep tapping me on the head? He said, I'm just checking if you're awake. For any of us in care, we would be like, when we had to go somewhere, it was very agonizing. So I had to leave for meetings, for service. And I said to him, he was sitting at the table, eating at the time, and I was at the door, and he wasn't looking at me, he was just looking straight ahead, and he wouldn't look at me. And then I was saying, Shruti Prabhu, I have to go now, I have to go for service. And he wouldn't say anything, he was just looking straight ahead. And I think it was Casey that was standing opposite to him. And they said, does he have permission to go? And he just sat and he said, no. And I said, Shruti Prabhu, I have to go for service. And then he just turned to me and he said, Aslisya vapadaritam pranashtumam, adarshanam mamahatam karotava, yata vivadato lampata, mat prananatastu sa eva napadaha. Now, if some of you aren't familiar with that verse of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it means for service, Krishna, you can trample me. Whether you embrace me or whether you trample me, that is your complete desire. Even if you leave me broken-hearted, but you will always be mat prananath, my love. There will never be another. That was his service spirit. So the poem, I want you to write a poem. You're a good poet. And I said, well, what would you suggest I put in the poem? And he was like, well, I don't know. Now this time there was these bhajans playing in the background. So we were listening to, I think, Agni Dev singing the different devotional songs, so it was influencing us. So I said to him, all right then, give me a few lines and then I'll give it some poetry. I didn't give it any poetry, and I think you'd much prefer to hear what he said. So, may I read it? At the end of life, what is left? Life is short, and before we know it, it is gone. Whatever we have done will come back to us. We must be true. Remain true to our beliefs. Now this song's in the background, and then he starts going, Gai Gauda Madhuswari, which means, Lord Chaitanya is very sweetly singing. Hare Krishna. We must use our time for a true purpose and always remain hopeful. We are separated. This all never happened in one moment like this. This was over like a couple of days. I kept coming back to him. Can I have another line for my poem? We are separated and lost souls. We must reunite with the Supreme Lord. You won't have anything to take back with you. What you've accrued will be gone. You work so hard thinking you will take it with you. But just remember that work, the good and bad, comes back to you, whether you like it or not. Then he sings, Bhajaba Katavatsala Shri Gaura Hari, and says, worship Lord Chaitanya, who's always kind to his devotees. Then he says, Shruti Prabhu again, and give this message of Gaura Hari to others. Then I said, coming to the end, I said, these things normally end with a line like this: the poet Shrutidharma prays. And I waited, and he said, for humility, to understand the Lord's heart and to serve his lotus feet. To conclude, and as a friend, Shruti Prabhu's little strap line, as you've seen on everything, as he continually said, was, this life is for serving others. And that really upset me. Because, you know, devotees like that take on a tremendous level of self-sacrifice, self-neglect. And it takes its toll. One day, I said to him, did you have any sweet dreams last night? And he said, I had a nightmare. What was your nightmare about? And he said, the world of ISKCON was getting bigger and I was getting smaller. On an occasion I asked him, what was the foremost quality of your mother that you remember? And he began to cry and sob and couldn't speak. And then he said, finally, amongst his tears and his shaking, very gently he said, complete kindness. And then I said to him, Shruti Prabhu, I just mentioned your mother, and you're just crying so much. I said, but in so many events, we never cried, we never exhibited anything. I said, even when you spoke at your mother's funeral, you gave a beautiful Krishna conscious address, but you never exhibited any emotion. And he looked at me from the bed and he said, we've been hidden. We can't hide anymore. It has to be real now. And then he said, I try to serve others. I hope they appreciate that. But I need peace now. I need to be alone. My heart is tired. His Grace Shrutidharma Prabhu ki